There are moments in the long, grinding history of human conflict where the death of a single man halts the world, where the fall of one body becomes the pivot point upon which the fate of empires turns. We often think of war as a collision of armies, a tide of steel and flesh. But the ancient storytellers knew that the heart of war is not strategy, but grief. It is a dark and terrible truth that tragedy is often the only force strong enough to pierce the armor of a heroa as pride. This is the story of the day the sun seemed to stop in the sky, the day the best of men fell, and the night the Iliad ceased to be a poem of quarrels and became a song of sorrow. This is the death of Patroclus. We must return to the windswept, dusty plains of Troy, where the Achaeans have been encamped for 9 long, weary years. The world here is one of bronze and blood, governed by the capricious whims of the Olympians, where honor is a currency more valuable than gold, and the wrath of a single warrior can curse an army. The great Achilles, the fleet of foot, has withdrawn from the fight. In a rage of wounded pride over the girl Briseis, he has sat by his ships in sullen silence, watching his countrymen die. The Trojans, led by the noble Hector and spurred on by the favor of Apollo, have pushed the Greeks back to the very edge of the sea, setting fire to their black hulls. The smoke rises thick and choking, a signal of despair, and the great wall the Greeks built is crumbling under the weight of the assault. Into this calamity steps Patroclus. He is not the greatest warrior, that title belongs to Achilles, and he is not the cleverest, that is Odysseus. But he is the kindest soul in the brutal Greek encampment. He is the shadow to Achilles' blinding light, the gentle hand that tends the wounded, the friend who shares the counsel and the bread. Seeing the slaughter of his comrades, seeing the very fleet of Argive eyes threatened with destruction, Patroclus can bear the silence no longer. He comes to Achilles weeping, not for himself, but for the dying multitude. Achilles, moved by the tears of his beloved companion, makes a fateful, ambiguous decree. He will not fight himself. His rage against Agamemnon is not yet Calida, but he allows Patroclus to don his divine armor. He tells him to lead the Myrmidons, his elite soldiers, into the fray to drive the Trojans back from the ships. But Achilles issues a warning that hangs heavy with doom. Drive the enemy from the ships, Patroclus, but do not pursue them to the walls of Ilium. Return, lest you rob me of my glory, for the gods are envious. Patroclus arms himself in the gleaming bronze that the gods themselves had given to Peleus, a panoply so terrifying that the mere sight of it is meant to scatter armies. He steps into the chariot, and Automedon takes the reins. They charge forth, and for a brief, shining hour, the tide of battle turns. The sight of the armor of Achilles strikes terror into the Trojans. They think the swift son of Peleus has returned. Patroclus fights with a ferocity born of desperation and borrowed strength. He cuts a swath through the ranks, slaughtering the finest sons of Troy. He drives them back across the trench of burning stakes, past the wall, quenching the fires on the ships. But here is where fate tightens its cold grip. In the heat of victory, in the madness of the charge, Patroclus forgets the command of his king. He ignores the boundary set by Achilles. He pursues the fleeing Trojans, thinking to take the city itself. He climbs the high slopes of the Acropolis, striking down the defenders like a storm. It is the fatal error of the hero who forgets he is merely mortal, mistaking the borrowed terror of his armor for his own invincibility. And then, the gods intervene. Apollo, the silver-bowed archer, protector of the Trojans, sees the havoc the Greek is wreaking. He descends from the peaks of Olympus, cloaked in a mantle of cloud, and stands behind Patroclus. The god strikes the armor from the warrior's shoulders. The heavy casque, with its horsehair crest, is sent rolling in the dust, and the shield falls from his arm. Patroclus is left dazed, exposed, his breath short, his limbs trembling. He is a lion caught in a trap, stripped of his strength. It is then that Hector sees him. The greatest Trojan warrior spots the Greek warrior standing confused, his armor gone, his body vulnerable. But Hector does not know he faces Patroclus. He thinks he has finally cornered Achilles. He rallies his men and charges. Patroclus stands his ground, gripping the heavy ash spear, knowing the end has come. He casts the weapon, and it finds its mark, piercing the neck of Hector's charioteer, Cebriones, smashing his skull. But the death of the driver only enrages the swarm. The battle narrows to a singular, brutal focus. Hector, noble Hector, breaker of horses, hurls his javelin. It strikes Patroclus not in the chest, but deep in the bowels. The wound is mortal, sickening, a blow that unhinges the spirit from the flesh. Patroclus sinks to the earth, his dark blood spilling into the dust of the foreign shore. Yet even as he falls, he speaks one last truth to his killer. It was not cruel fate that took me, nor Hector, but my own arrogance. I paid no heed to the word of Achilles. He dies, and the Greeks and Trojans swarm over his body like jackals fighting over a stag, a terrible struggle of men and mares, of bronze striking bronze over the lifeless husk of the gentle warrior. The news travels to Achilles like a chill wind. It is not the messenger who tells him first, but the thunderous silence of the battlefield, the screaming of the horses, and the sight of his armor, despoiled and bloodied, worn now by the triumphant Hector. The reaction of Achilles is the shuddering center of the myth. He falls to the earth, he tears at his hair, he rolls in the dirt, his voice a raw, animalistic wail that echoes across the Aegean. His mother, the sea goddess Thetis, rises from the depths to find her son prostrate, his heart breaking not for the loss of war, but for the loss of his other half. He vows a vengeance so absolute it will defy the laws of Naturia. He will kill Hector, even if it ensures his own death follows soon after. To the ancient Greeks, this story was the hinge of their greatest epic. It was a lesson in the terrible cost of hubris, not just for kings, but for those who reach too high beyond their fate. Patroclus died not because he was weak, but because he tried to be Achilles. He wore armor that did not belong to him, and he sought a glory that was not his to claim. It encodes the fear that in the chaos of war, identity is fragile, and death comes not just to the wicked, but to the virtuous who step out of their place. It tells us that grief is the most dangerous fuel of all, capable of burning down the structures of civilization. The legacy of Patroclus is written in the stars and in the dust. His death is the engine of the Iliad-esque conclusion. Without it, the war would have stagnated forever. It is the tragedy that humanizes the invincible Achilles, transforming him from a petulant child into a figure of terrifying, sympathetic grandeur. The image of the two friends, ash and bone, buried together in a single golden urn, has haunted art for 3 millennia. It survives in the plays of Athens, the sculptures of Rome, and the novels of our own time, reminding us that the strongest of men are bound by the weakest parts of their hearts. And so, we leave him there, Patroclus, the companion, the savior of the ships, the victim of his own.